Hey guys, welcome to a special bonus edition of the A-Pod Fun Chats, Fun Topics, Fun People. I'm your host, Arda Ocal, and yes, for the third week in a row, can you believe it? We have a special bonus episode for you. Basically, Fridays is becoming the bonus episode day. And I hope you guys are enjoying it. Thank you very much for subscribing on iTunes, on Google Play, finding it at msgnetworks.com, and especially for those who have left 5-star ratings and reviews, comments on iTunes. I appreciate that very much because it does help the algorithm in terms of iTunes pushing it forward to other people. So thank you very much for doing that, and thank you for listening. So our special podcast, we'll get right to it. It is Dave Maloney. If you watch MSG Networks, if you listen to the New York Rangers on the radio, you are very familiar with Mr. Maloney. If you've been following the New York Rangers franchise for several decades, you know that he wore the C for the Rangers for a period of time. Very well known in the city of New York. We get to a lot of fun topics about his love for hockey, how he discovered it, his time with the Rangers, even being traded for one season to the Buffalo Sabres, what he did when he retired from hockey, and of course becoming a color commentator. So here it is, our conversation in this bonus edition of the A-Pod with Dave Maloney. So here we are, Madison Square Garden. We're on the 5th floor. I've never actually been here. This is the 6th floor.
6th floor.
You can tell I haven't been here.
Yeah.
That we're in a press area, I believe. There's a lot of cubicles, a lot of people feverishly working on their laptops.
You're one of the few that are allowed in the radio lounge.
That's right.
This is the radio area.
By permission only.
Yeah, permission. Okay. We had to screen you.
There was a big vetting process. So Dave Maloney's our guest here on the podcast. And I've been looking forward to this conversation. You've had quite the life as an NHL player, transitioning to broadcasting, and I want to talk about all that. So let's start at the beginning. You born in Kitchener, grew up in Lindsay, Ontario.
Yeah, I did. I put it this way: I was born. I'm the oldest of 7. Yeah. And I was 7, right? I was. So I was born in July of '56. My brother Bob was August of '57, and Don was September of '58.
So, as the oldest of 7, do you feel responsible to help raise, like, because there's so many kids and you're the oldest? Do you feel responsible in a way?
Well, I'm sure that may have become more of a factor had I stuck around long enough. But I actually, went to Toronto when I was 14
to pursue the hockey.
Yeah, to pursue the hockey.
What was your first hockey memory? How did you discover hockey?
Oh boy, isn't it a Canadian thing? You just you just come out with either a stick or skates or something. Especially rural Canada. I was northeast of Toronto and small little town of Lindsay, Ontario. And I best describe for me my memories of hockey as a kid when we moved to Kitchener, which is it's a major city, southwest of Toronto, Kitchener-Waterloo. I met he's still a lifelong pal, my good buddy Mike Sale. And we were 15 at the time. So one thing led to another, and I asked him who he played for. And he said he didn't play. I said, what do you mean you don't play? You're a guy, aren't you? Every Canadian guy plays hockey. Which is more, my, I grew up on a farm, little rural town. There wasn't a lot of money, but everybody played hockey. So, and we were no different.
So you moved to Toronto at age 14.
14, yeah.
At that point, how confident were you, or did you have thoughts that, I might actually make it to the NHL?
You know what? It's funny. I never ever. I'm sure when I was a little kid, like everyone else, I'm sure I was asked at one point, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure when I wrote down a hockey player, Sister Mary Jean said, maybe put down a real job. Like a carpenter or a farmer or something like that. So I'm sure, like every Canadian boy, but really I haven't been asked that question over time. I think I never really thought I was going to play until I actually played. It wasn't like I had a lack of confidence in myself. And really, I probably played 2 years before I even believed I belonged in the league. So perhaps it was just maybe the innocence, the way we grew up, or something like that. Yeah. But I always loved playing. I never had to be awoken to go to practice. I didn't go to any high school proms. I didn't but I don't feel I missed one single thing growing up the way I grew up, with hockey being the important part. And when I do talk, I must make reference. So I went to Bobby Orr's camp, which was Bobby Orr, Mike Walton sports camp, north of Toronto in Orillia, when I was 12. And to this day, I don't know how my father did it. And we didn't have any money, but he was able to kind of barter and negotiate. I ended up going for a total of 3 weeks.
Wow.
So in that subsequent winter, I also remember they had a distinctive logo, the Orr Walton Sports Camp, a distinctive logo. So an envelope shows up at our house addressed to my father. And I remember I steamed it open. And they were offering me a job as a junior counselor as a 13-year-old. And I remember thinking, oh God, that would be really cool, but how am I going to kind of get this by my father that I actually opened his mail? So I told him I opened the mail, and one thing led to another, and really, of all the things along the way, those summers at that camp were the difference. When I look back, it was a full sports camp. So I started as a junior counselor. I made $50 for 11 weeks, and then I ended up as an on-ice pro instructor.
Wow.
But those years and those experiences were invaluable.
So after that, obviously you got through junior hockey like many NHL players do. St. Michael's Majors.
I played at St. Mike's. I was a 14-year-old. I played for the Buzzers. They were a junior B team at the time.
Okay.
Then my family moved to Kitchener. I played junior B for the Kitchener Rangers, and then 2 years of junior A in Kitchener. So I moved. When my family moved back, I moved back home because the move to Toronto was hockey-centric, and so when there were options back in Kitchener, I was able to move back home.
So take me through the range of emotions. You get the call saying you're going to be part of the NHL. You're going to join. give me that moment.
I'll tell you, so I was 17, and I was running part of the track and field program at St. Jerome's High School, and it was the spring, so the draft was up.
Yeah. So
2 days before the draft, having now been involved with Orr's camp and different hockey people, Alan Eagleson specifically, Alan Eagleson had called my mother, called home, and to say that there's a good chance that Dave would be drafted.
Wow.
Could we sit down and consider those options? And I remember walking into the house, unbeknownst to me, and she had gotten this phone call, and she was cooking, and there was smoke all through the kitchen. And she was so excited when she got that call that she forgot that she was cooking dinner for everyone. And as it would turn out, Montreal, who drafted 2 of my junior teammates before I was picked, Boston, and Chicago were all, those were the interests according to Alan Eagleson at the time, and lo and behold, out of the blue, the Rangers drafted me. So I was on my way. Alan Eagleson had a bunch of us were picks, and he was having a reception in Toronto, and I was on the day of the draft, and I remember driving and hearing on the radio that I got picked by the Rangers. So,
wow.
So it was great.
What were your initial thoughts of playing for New York and being in New York City playing hockey?
I'd been to Detroit.
You'd never been to New York City before that?
I'd never been to New York. The times were a lot different then than they certainly are now.
Different city, right?
Different city for sure. New York City in 1974, 75.
Yeah.
It's a mere shadow of the great city that it is now. I remember, I must tell you, Ron Greshner was, I was the first pick. Gresh was the second pick. We actually had camp in Kitchener, rookie camp in Kitchener in the first part of camp. So when camp broke, the Rangers farm team was in Providence. Mm-hmm. So we both broke camp. Then we got called up to play an exhibition game against Detroit. And he had been in New York. His agent at the time was from New York. He had been in New York a little bit that summer, and I had never been. So I remember flying from Providence, coming from Kennedy Airport, going the Long Island Expressway, which I wouldn't have a clue what that was then, and through the Midtown Tunnel, which I'd been through the tunnel in Detroit, from Windsor to Detroit, But this tunnel seemed to be forever. But prior to if anybody's ever been, well, whoever's lived, certainly if you've gone to the Midtown Tunnel, you see the cemetery that's to the left. There's got to be 1 million people in that cemetery. You know?
Yeah, pretty morbid.
Everything was so big. And the final part of our journey, we were dropped off in front of the garden and had our bags, you know, and had our sticks. And I remember there was a security guard out front. We asked him, how do we get to the rink? And he said, well, you go around the corner, you take the elevator to the 5th floor. Like, the 5th floor? What do you mean the 5th floor? Well, the rink is actually on the 5th floor of this building.
Right.
Every rink I ever skated on was on the ground floor.
It's on the ground floor, yeah, exactly.
So it was all, so that's where the journey began. And I don't ever remember being terribly intimidated by the city, but it was an adventure. It was a tremendous adventure.
You obviously have the distinction of being the youngest captain in New York Rangers history and lore. Take me into that moment when you found out that you were going to be the captain at such a young age, when you had legends on the team, which I think is very interesting. I mean, Esposito was on the team. You had all these, elder statesmen, and here you are receiving the C. What was that like?
Yeah, that was pretty cool too. I mean, it was we had camp. It was camp in 1978. We'd camp, and we were breaking camp, and there was a sponsors luncheon in Rye. And I remember Freddie Shiro was our coach. He was just new. And he pulled me aside and said, we're going to make you captain. And it actually, honestly, came out of left
field.
That. Just, we're going to make you captain.
Hey, Dave, you got a second here? Let me pull you aside. Just so you know, you're going to be captain now.
Yeah. Well, what happened is, right? Well, not especially.
That's such a pivotal moment, right?
Well, especially as that role is morphed into what it is now. And in this franchise, what Mark Messier did as the captain, it created this thing that it is now. That it always was a bit of an iconic role, right? I mean, in our sport. And we were a young team. The core of the team was quite young. And I was right in the middle of the youth. And according, Phil told me after that he had a meeting with Fred when Freddie got hired and said, listen, this team is heading one way and I'm probably heading the other. And I think it's important that you think about the leadership for your core group. And according to Phil, he thought that I would be the right person for the role. So it was quite an honor. It was, and I hope that I wore it as proudly as I think it did, and as proudly as I have been a very small part of the tradition of this great franchise.
So when you were captaining that Cup run, making it to the Stanley Cup Finals, what was it like being in the locker rooms to have to do the rally speeches and get people out of their get them motivated to play? Like, what was that like?
Well, I was a pretty, now listen, I'm speaking now as a 60-year-old.
Okay.
I was 22, and emotion was a huge part of my game. I was fiery. Some people would say angry. All those really good things for a hockey player.
Right.
So lots of times I had a very good support system that year. And it was Phil, JD, John Davidson, God rest his soul, my partner, defense partner, Carol Vadney, Walter Kachuk. They had been around the block a little bit. So when I got a little crazed, Dave,
were they giving you advice?
Absolutely.
Esposito pulling you aside?
Phil, the most important guy was John Davidson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
John was a consummate guy's guy, consummate man's man, and he had the pulse of everyone. And when he felt, and I respected him very much, and to this day respect him very much, because he would pull me aside, or let's go to lunch. Listen, this is, and he was tremendous. He was tremendous. Phil was a Hall of Fame player. Phil had his way of doing things, But JD was so. I'm sure there were moments. I remember moments. For me, expressing myself in those days was emotional. It was breaking sticks, was throwing stuff. It's that emotion, that compete, all those things that I never knew any other way to be. To me, that was being a leader, is to care, to cry when you lose, get angry when you lose, do the things that you needed to do to improve, to get better, all those things. So I do wish I had a little 60-year-old savvy as a 22-year-old. But I'm
hindsight
not sure
being 2020, right?
Right. I'm not sure how savvy I was.
So, and you spent your entire career, except for a blip,
in Buffalo,
with the New York Rangers. What was that? You must have assumed at some point that you would just spend your entire career here and you would end as a Ranger, or did you ever come close even before that to being traded?
I never really paid a lot of attention to it.
Really?
But to me, if Bobby Orr couldn't finish as a Bruin, who am I to think? Who am I to think? If Gordie Howe couldn't finish the Red Wings, now there were different, Bobby Hull, there are very few. Wayne Gretzky, you move along, there are very few people in this league over the history that have a career like Ron Greschner, Jean Beliveau. There aren't many. So it certainly was. I remember the day I got traded. Craig Patrick called me in before practice. We had a great chat, an emotional chat. And I remember by the time I got back down to my locker, the locker was all cleaned up. My stuff was all packed. And it was 10 years.
Wow.
Gone.
Just like that.
Then you're off to the next
The nameplate comes off.
The nameplate.
Wow.
Really, I don't want to be overly melodramatic.
Sure.
But it was. I remember driving out of the parking lot thinking, wow, that was 9 years in a box, and now it's on to the next adventure. Yeah.
I always love hearing stories of when you first walk into the locker room for the team you just got traded to. So here you are, you walk into the Buffalo Sabres locker room. There must be at least one or two guys where you were playing on the other side and there was some moments or animosity or something that now just needs to be quashed completely.
Right.
Your teammates now.
Right.
Did you encounter anything like that when you walked into the Sabres locker room?
I must tell you the first story about my transition. So I fly to Buffalo early Thursday morning. Early Friday morning. I get traded on Thursday. Friday morning, it's 8 o'clock flight, 7:30. So I get to Buffalo. I come down the stairs to pick up my bags, and who's waiting there to pick me up? Scotty Bowman. So I get my bags. I get in the car, and Scotty says, "I have to stop at my house to pick up something." Sure. And then we pull into his driveway, and he says, "Listen, I might be a while. Why don't you come on in?" So I go into his house, and in Scotty's way, he said, "Why don't you just go into the room on the left? Wait for me in there."
Okay.
So I go in there, and there are 5 Stanley Cup replicas.
Gee, I wonder why you picked that room.
Right, and I on full disclosure, admitted I was a pretty emotional character. To this day, when asked about Scotty Bowman and his success, I feel a lot of his success, he found the right buttons. Had nothing to do with X's and O's. So that was my story. We go to the rink, and eventually the two of 3 guys that I thought were idiots to play against, Larry Playfair and Lindy Ruff.
Oh, man.
Mike Ramsey, I didn't think he was an idiot. He's a tremendous player. But the 3 of them were tremendose guys. And then I was thinking, well, they might have thought I was an idiot too. And hopefully I'm okay as a guy. Hopefully, but those 3 guys were in my first practice. I remember Tommy Barrasso. Tommy at that time was probably about 19, 20. And we had a drill. It was basically just take the pucks and go in and shoot on the goalie to warm up. And Gilbert Perreault, future Hall of Famer, shot one off of Tommy's left shoulder. Tommy stormed off the ice. That was it. So I remember saying to Mike Ramsey, "What is that?" "Well, you'll get used to it. That's Tommy Barrasso being Tommy." I said, wow.
Okay. Even in practice, he's that intense.
And
Don't
Gilles
score
Perreault,
on me.
Right.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Wow.
Yeah, so it was good. At that time, you know, I had been pretty well rooted in New York. I'd worked on Wall Street for 3 summers, and it had absolutely nothing to do with Buffalo. I loved the people there. The Sabres were tremendous, the Knox owners, but it had come to the point where, you know what, it's time to move on. The game wasn't as much fun as it was for a long time. Mm-hmm. I was becoming more of a kind of a utility player in a role, and so I decided, you know what, I had 2 years left on a contract, and I decided to retire, and I moved on.
So one thing I wanted to do was really focus on your transition from your playing days to becoming a broadcaster. So tell me the jobs that you did once you retired from hockey to becoming a broadcaster. What was the first thing you did?
First thing I did actually was it's now WFAN in New York here. Yeah. They went to all sports, an all sports format. I think it was like July of '85. So the 85-86 season, I did a nightly report on the NHL. I had kind of over the course of my career, when I got hurt in the playoffs in 1981, 82, somewhere in there. And I ended up in the booth with the father of Kenny Albert, Marv Albert. Oh. And
funny how life works out sometimes.
Yeah, it is. I remember that little whippersnapper.
Which Albert was a better broadcaster? Not that Kenny Albert's in the room right now or anything.
Well,
shout out to Kenny, by the way, who closed the door for us so that the sound wouldn't get through.
So I started.
He'll be a future guest.
So that got. I always liked the medium of radio.
Did you have media? Like I remember, I interviewed Ken Danica once, and he said, you know, media people would always tell me I should pursue broadcasting after my career in hockey. Did you get that a lot? Like, did people tell you, hey, maybe you should think about?
Well, what happened was over time when I was out of the game. So my first entree was that experience in the playoffs with Marv Albert and Sal Messina. And my plan when I retired was to work the street. I worked on Wall Street. And to do, at that time, Sal Messina, he did only the home games on radio. To make a long story short, it looked like Sal was heading to TV, and I had a shot at the home games on radio. Well, it didn't work out that way. And ultimately, what happened over the course of time, if anybody needed anybody at a certain point, I would lots of times get a call. And that morphed. So I worked for CTV, CBC. I was the studio co-host when the NHL was on Fox with James Brown. Wow. So along the way, there were numerous different things that I did.
All in broadcasting?
All in broadcasting. Okay. Yeah. Like,
was that ever a dream? Was that ever a thought of yours, or?
No, not at that time. Okay. I again, on full disclosure, I was making some pretty good money on the street, and at that time, I had a young family. Yeah. I had an opportunity to be a sports. You know, Fox, local Fox. You know, they had me in the studio and then some mock telecasts, and at that point I thought about making a career change into there, but at the end of the day I couldn't afford to do it.
I want to get to how you got hooked up with MSG, but tell me about your time with David Letterman.
Well, that was tremendous, and it's another experience. I've had so many experiences that I would never have had. A, had it not been for hockey, or B, being in this market. So David, he was doing the show in those days. It was a late night show, but he shot the show at 5:30 in the afternoon. So David was going to he put on the goal pads, the goal equipment, and he wanted somebody to shoot on. And the scuttlebutt of the rumor was that they wanted to get Wayne Gretzky. And I can't imagine that Wayne wouldn't do it. It would be more like he couldn't do it. So
what year was this?
This was 1981.
Okay.
81.
Okay.
I think it was 81. Yeah, it was 81. And so Kenny, once again, it comes back to this Albert angle. Kenny's father, Marv, was doing, he would do sports bloopers often. I think he may have been the one personality that appeared the most times over David Letterman's career. It was Marv Albert.
Yeah.
So when Wayne can't come, or whatever, apparently Marv suggested, I got a guy that'll do it. And he suggested me. So I ended up on David Letterman. And to this day, I wished I could have been able to shoot the puck like Mike Bossy did in those days, or Ovechkin these days, so I could be able to ring one off the crossbar or something and scare him a little bit. But I didn't want to run the risk.
You didn't do that?
No.
I can just imagine just winding up for a slap shot right off the mask.
Well, I didn't want to do that. Dave? Yeah, I didn't want to do that because I couldn't trust where it was going to end up.
Ready for this one?
Yeah. Okay, that throat issue you have. No. So it was really.
Well, he's got the height. I mean,
yeah, no, it was good. He wasn't the most mobile character in there, but
the height's going for him. Maybe everything else in goaltender ranks, maybe not so much.
Yeah, so that was quite fun. And now you can run, but you can't hide any longer with YouTube and videos. And that's been posted, and there's been a number of things. Over time, the Sassoon ad campaign we were involved in Sassoon Jeans, the hockey sock rock for juvenile.
Do you get asked about that a lot?
Not a lot.
No?
Not a lot. My best story about the...
great song.
No, it was actually... Yeah, what a tune. Catchy little jingle, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The best story about that one is we got a replica 45 for sales of 100,000 copies. And rumor has it that Gordon Lightfoot, Alan Thicke, the recently departed Alan Thicke, he was the driver behind the process of the song and the record, and it was for juvenile diabetes. Anyway, so we get this thing 1,000 or 100,000 copies. But rumor has it that Gordon Lightfoot bought 90,000 copies.
Yes, that is online. That is a rumor online. Yes, 90,000 copies bought by Gordon Lightfoot. Where did he put them all?
Yeah,
you got to wonder.
Do you think he took delivery of? They couldn't have been.
Can you imagine that UPS delivery?
Yeah, right. The guy coming up the driveway with. So if they're $10 for our, he's got 9,000 of these things coming. But that was an experience.
Who was in that? Ronnie Dukes was in that.
Yeah,
Duguay was in that.
JD.
JD was in it. Was Esposito part of that?
Phil. Yeah, Phil was the biggest part.
Yeah.
Because Phil had the relationship with Alan Thicke.
Okay.
And the rest of us we were out on California on a trip. We were actually on the Dinah Shore show. And in that trip, we were there with the Sassoon Jean commercial drive. And on that trip, we made the hockey sock rock. So. You couldn't tell it was
that is that the picture? Because I think Ron has it as his profile picture.
Oh, is that right?
Is it like he's wearing jeans and he has like a towel over him or something? It's like a model picture.
Yeah.
That might have been it.
Are you shocked?
No. No. There's not with the Dukes.
No, not with Dukes. You can trust me. There's not a picture like that of me.
I was gonna say, was that part of the campaign?
Yeah.
If that's the case, I need people to tweet us this picture immediately. Just to see that it exists.
No, Duke. Well, Duke's career went where it went.
Yeah.
You know, and but it was all fun. It was just again, a lot of those things came as a result of winning, though.
Right. You know. So I wanted to ask that. Like, what were some of the perks living in New York City, making it to the Stanley Cup Finals? You guys are prominent athletes now. Almost winning the Stanley Cup. So what sort of perks around the city did that bring you? Must have been a lot of fun to be an athlete in your early 20s at that time.
Yeah, it was certainly fun. It was a lot of fun. I mean, it's just the notoriety, your ability to, I don't know, get into the restaurant that you needed to get into, or you get a deal on clothes, or But at the end of the day, it was. Having been that close was the greatest perk of all of it.
Yeah.
Everything else, all right, it was fun to be able to get into a restaurant, but the greatest perk was being there.
So anybody who talks about 94, of course, I mean, by then, it was at a fever pitch for fans of the New York Rangers, right? What was it like when you were playing? There was still a 30-year span that the team hadn't won the cup. So, like, did you feel that? Was it palpable among was it palpable among fans that, you know, the Rangers were due and people were getting restless? Like, what was the fans like?
I guess I can best, there are two ways to best kind of summarize my experience of 94. Game 7 against the Devils, a tremendously intense game, and Zelepukin ties it up late. So into that moment, the crescendo of the building was off the chart, absolutely off the chart. Zelepukin scores, you bums, you were never going to win, we're never going to do this. So in that span of 30 seconds, the passion and the involvement, to me, I didn't quite experience that sense because we actually lost Game 5 in Montreal. So that sense of disappointment or whatever. And then when they won in 94, I worked for Bear Stearns at the time. I was late. I was out late the night. My wife and I were invited to Game 7. We stayed late. I remember listening to President Clinton call Brian Leach. Brian had won the MVP, and over the press area, the president called to congratulate Brian Leach. I thought that was so cool.
Oh, wow.
And
so everyone could hear the call?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And,
that's cool.
And then the next day, I'm late to work the next day, and I worked in a big kind of trading floor.
Okay.
And I walked in.
What were you doing at that time?
I was in institutional equity sales.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I did that for 20 years. So this is 94, I'm midway through that career. And I remember getting to late, and I remember getting an ovation walking to my desk.
Really?
And to me, it just once again showed being part of a long, an entity that's been in a community for a significant amount of time. Regardless of what role you played, some played a bigger role, some played a little smaller role, but you were part of a significant win at the time, according to the local community. I thought that was so cool.
You know, now you have a different view of the game. What are some of your highlights sitting in the booth? Other than working with Kenny, of course.
Well, I've been very, very blessed to work with professionals, and I do listen to a lot, and I watch a lot, and so from that standpoint, my whole MSG crew I work with, both on radio and the TV side, couldn't be more consummately professional. The highlights, of course, 2014, that whole run was special. You know, Game 7s against the Caps. There have been, I can think of a game, a come from behind late win this season against Columbus, where I happened to be with Don LaGreca that night, and we both just about jumped out of the booth. I think for me, as I mentioned before, I enjoy the emotion of life, and radio is still the medium where you can get away with a lot. and it's just thinking of the times that I've been able to not only play the game but be privy to the game. I've been blessed. So I'm sure if I thought about it long enough, it's a little bit like my goal scoring career. I didn't score enough not to remember them, but I don't remember them.
Right.
I do remember one in the finals against Ken Dryden. That's about it. But
do you remind him every time you see him?
Yeah, actually, one last story. We had him on the hockey show. I was part of the with Kenny and Butch Goring. I know you guys do the hockey show now, but we were the baptism route early in the hockey show. And we had Ken Dryden on. And talking about one thing led to another, and 79 was the worst experience in his life, according to him.
Wow.
He realized his career was over. He was going to retire, and I'm sitting there thinking, that was the best time of my life.
Hey, Kenny, remember that goal?
Hey, and that's what he said. I do remember it, and that's why it was.
That moment made him want to retire. Yeah. If Dave Maloney's scoring on me, I need to retire right now. That was the moment. Anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, I have been blessed. I've been blessed in a lot of ways. I'm very thankful.
And you're very busy tonight. It's a playoff night. You're about to go on the air, and you have a bunch of interviews to do. So thank you very much for joining us. So there you have it, a very fun chat with Dave Maloney, and I can tell you that even though Kenny Albert was in the room, he was literally preparing for a playoff game, and he actually fed me a couple of questions. I should have said, hey, we got a question here from Ken in Midtown who asks, but I didn't think on my feet enough. But anyway, Kenny will be a guest on a future edition of the A-Pod, and if you have any suggestions on any guests that you would love to hear on this program, whether they work with MSG Networks or not, please send me a tweet at Arda Ocal TV. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your comments. And thank you very much for listening. We'll be back on Wednesday with another regularly scheduled episode of the A-Pod. Have a great weekend, everyone.